Is it this one?
No, it was another one, but I don't know if maybe somebody took it accidentally.
Check in the audiovisual office.
Okay.
Yeah, they may have taken it. Yeah. There's room at the front. So I'd like to welcome everyone to an evening celebration that continues on a wonderful day of student presentations for housing and urbanism. But tonight we have a really special opportunity to welcome Stephan Sintzel from Zurich. I started to discuss earlier, as we were still thinking about the student presentations, why it is that we've invited Stephan. And I mentioned that, in fact, our students were spotting the quality of the work and putting it in front of us. And it obviously, earlier Simon during the jury was mentioning that architecture has to have a sense of empathy as well as a sense of logic. And I think that's perhaps not a bad way to think about some of what Stephan has been writing to me lately as we've been discussing this keynote. And a lot of what Stephan was suggesting was that there was an empathy for how people live in dwellings. And so somehow that was an early part of a lot of the work that was being done previously in Sintzel, and you've carried over. But then there started to be a kind of wider empathy and sense about how to engage with a landscape, begin to understand how new forms of everyday life might be encouraged through the way in which the volumes of the apartment buildings that always seem to be the protagonist of development nevertheless begin to generate some kind of urban life where that new kind of experience begins to take shape. And so architecture comes not just to be in a setting, but to become the landscape. I think one of the things that we began to notice as a lot of what housing and urbanism does is that we start looking at precedent projects. We investigate things that are happening in other places and ask questions about why can't they be done here? Why is that so difficult to achieve in London? And so it was very interesting earlier in the conversations around the student projects that there seem to be things that can be done elsewhere or can be done at one moment in time. And then we become disabled in a way. And so raising the question by sort of seeing what is being done currently elsewhere and seeing the subtle but perhaps very important shifts in the way in which we interpret a volume or rethink an envelope or discuss a new way of addressing a site or look for new ways of valuing the circulatory environment of a building. All of these things begin to add up to something that really is transformative. And it seems to me that that Stephan Sintzel's work in Studio Sintzel really emblematizes and embodies that way of thinking. So it's quite, you can see that it has a certain amount of Swiss rationality. And yet underlying that is a real attention to the detail of things. And that detail might be found in the ground just outside a building, or it might be found in the way in which we understand the passages through rooms. But our students were picking up on that and noticing, in a sense, what was valuable in the work. Now, Stephan has had a long career, and he's worked with a number of Zurich practices. He's also been trained widely. He spent time at Columbia in New York. He spent time at ETH. He started his studies at Winterthur, but in a way it seems that all of these episodes have added up to something that is very distinctive as a kind of personality that is really much more than the sum of its parts. And one of the things that we were very curious about in a way was, how is your work evolving as you move from Sintzel, where you had so much achievement together with Philipp Esch and Marco Rickenbacker, and yet you've still found reasons to move out onto your own and develop a new line of thinking. And I think one of the things we were very curious about was where these sorts of decisions had come from. Now, some of the answer I already know in what Stephan has been saying, and that is, as a philosophy, Studio Sintzel works very much with the idea that, and we might agree with Stan Allen on this, that architecture is a material practice. We learn from project to project. It's a kind of study of things, lessons learned by moving from one project to another. And so it's a way of thinking about how things are made and what we discover about the way in which they're inhabited. With this in mind, as we trace the kinds of projects that Stephan has led over the years, I think we will discover a lot of guidance for the way in which we all ought to be thinking about our profession. So Stephan, we welcome you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great honor for me to speak here at the AA in London. How you mentioned, I was partner at Sintzel Architect from 2009 to 2024. Since we split 2 years ago, I've been running my own office, Studio Sintzel. We are fortunate to live and work in Switzerland. The country has a lively competition scene where we've been able to acquire most of our projects through competitions. Last year, for instance, we won 3, and now we're growing again to unless 20 employees. Our work at Studio Sintzel changed, and the knowledge from Sintzel.
They say they're having trouble hearing the back.
Okay. Like this is better? Yeah. Okay. Our work at Studio Sintzel builds on knowledge that we gained at Sintzel. We also deal mainly with residential construction and are happy when the construction projects are larger and we can tackle urban development issues. To begin at the beginning. Without being a great connoisseur of Aldo Rossi, we always found his interpretation of the city fascinating. In his writing, he distinguished between the primary elements, the monumenti, urban architecture, and the connective tissue, the tessuto, which for him includes the residential buildings. Whether it's fate or a reflection of our characters, we felt committed to the fabric of the city. This is not an architecture that pushes itself to the front. Instead, this is an architecture where the qualities are not obvious straight away and are only noticed at the second glance. To make the end of our collaboration, we published the book in German and English, Sintzel Architects. Here it's look like. Our aim was always to try and design our urban structure according to rules, like a woven material with a harmony that repeats itself, and so generates its own pattern. Or to put it differently, if you were to combine our projects together into a fictional city, you can hopefully see how they differ from each other in terms of their internal logic. Our early project, we developed our buildings based on this internal logic. Starting with a spatial idea, we assembled apartments into single structures. The outer space were the byproduct that remained as more or less controllable. Leftover spaces. Brumat Ost in Bern is one early project, is a good example for this. Here you can see the outdoor spaces. Looking back over the last 15 years, there were also key moments. For instance, during the test planning for the Oberzelt housing project in Winterthur Sennhof. After finishing the test planning in 2010, the project was suspended for 3 years. And when we started the planning again in 2013, we felt that the spaces of the buildings were not precise enough. This is this side. The angled structure symbolized driftwood that had been washed up on the construction site by the river. Basically an abstract idea that had very little to do with spatial thinking. Refining the project, we began to question our first approach. Basically, we turned everything inside out. Beforehand, the volumes of the buildings were determined by the internal layouts. Afterwards, it was the sequence of outer spaces that now defined the center of the housing estate. The impulse for this involved 3 elements. The public space leading to the railway station, a lane as a threshold to the courtyard of the housing project, and another lane leading to an open space facing the landscape. Essentially, we cut the outer spaces into the buildings, clearly expressed in 2 volumes where the building mass is reduced to the depth of a room. So these are these 2 buildings. This project fixed our idea that outer space have a greater impact on the design of a housing complex than the building themselves. In 2013, we won the open competition for the Maingasse residential development in Basel. The building site is located in a courtyard in Basel, close to the Ringstrasse in Greater Basel, not far from the Rhine. The courtyard had formerly been used as a workshop yard with a wooden shed in the middle, surrounded by old cars and other junk. In one spot, someone had made themselves at home, a workshop yard, but at the same time with a domestic touch. The aim in this case was to try and keep this semi-private output open atmosphere. Our concept consisted of a bracket that spans a courtyard within the courtyard. At the same time, this architectural device encloses and organizes the outer spaces. Green areas run along the outside circle of the perimeter building block, serving as private gardens for the flats and the children's nursery. In the center is an open courtyard, a street space available for residents to use as they want to. Is it meant to provide scope for possibilities, empty and therefore flexible? Added to this, the closeness of the communal areas and the private living space along the courtyard required an architectural answer, a threshold that clearly marks the crossover from private to public. By inserting a plateau, we created a higher ground floor and moved the facade back to form a covered entrance area. Along those areas, we developed maisonette flats that extended over 3 floors. The entrance to the flats leads directly into the kitchen diner area. The space then became more and more private, with the living space located further back and the bedroom on the other floor. Also here it is the entrance, and this is the kitchen diner, and here is the living room, and then you can go up the stairs and you have the bedrooms. This is down, there's one bedroom down, and this are upstairs. To illustrate here a few pictures to show how those spaces have meanwhile been adapted and used. Here you can see how this area with tables and flower pots is used as a terrace by the residents. Here a flea market in the courtyard, or a neighborhood party. The key thing is the empty middle, with the houses grouped around it, which provides a stage for the residents to then fill. An empty middle is always undefined. It's not us who say how it should be used. Instead, it's the community, the residents, who decide how to adapt it. Our Kuppe project in Horgen is similar to Maingasse. Horgen is located on Lake Zurich, and the site has an incredible view, which is why most of the existing buildings in the area face out to the lake. Our development is different. It is self-controlled, taking an opposite approach. The clients wanted to promote the feeling of community, of living in harmony with nature. The idea, therefore, was to organize the housing units in the form of a circle of wagons. As in Basel, the hope was that the middle would focus an idea of shared community. The development is part of a new neighborhood that will be built. The neighborhood is connected by a path that loops around the hilltop, and that is where we have situated our houses. As you can see, the houses are grouped around an empty meadow. The precise setting was a result of a long thinking process, where we tried to find a balance between spatial enclosure and openness to the landscape. How we then placed them represents a snapshot in time. The guiding idea was to express something temporary, a sense of lightness. They are additively bolted together, giving them a kind of bricolage effect. We were not particularly interested in which way the flats faced. Some face to the lake, others to the mountains. The houses are built with bulkheads that radiate out in the landscape on all sides. All the houses are roughly the same. Once again, this area in front of the houses were crucial. The overhanging roof protects the transition from the house to the garden, where the entrance to the flats are also located. The large doorway gates creates a distance to the neighbors. When open out, they act as blind to next door forecourts. When closed, they signal privacy when wanted. The additive principle is also expressed in the rise roof. Elements like the gutter, the beams, and the corrugated iron can be read as separate items and are not flush with the construction. Each unit is made up of two maisonette flats, making what I think in England you call a granny flat. The functional program is designed to let people on their own live right next to two families, creating a multiple generational living environment. Each unit has a two-story room at the entrance, followed by the kitchen diner space. The flats are distinguished as a continuous space that can be furnished as the occupant wishes. Here, for instance, this wallrobe, as is in the build before, this wallrobe here is on rolls, and you can move it around. The key idea is that the residents can switch as they want between privacy and community. Even in the most intimate place, you are part of the community. Here, the double folding doors from the middle, in the background, the lake. As said at the beginning, our current project tried to take this thing further and to modify and refine it. The ideas developed into the two previous examples are refined in the Storchen housing project in Ettwil. This is a new project that we won last year as Studio Sintzel. Working in the new constellation, what we now often do is take approaches from the Sintzel area that we reacted and developed them further. Again, the important factor is that the individual buildings relate to each other through the outer space, thus forming a large-scale whole. Huttwil am See is located near Zurich in the countryside. The village is not connected to the railway network, meaning that public transport is patchy. The key thing for the clients is that the development nevertheless attracts urban people who will enjoy living together in this location. The site is nestled in a hilly landscape at the foot of the Pfannenstiel, the chain of hills along the Lake Zurich. The first step in the application was to write the ladder of motivation. Sketching my first ideas, it was clear that the most important aspect was its scenic location, with views over the landscape in all directions. The other advantage was that I grew up nearly and feel emotionally connected to this landscape. I remember a picture by Heini Waser, who painted this landscape, which also hung in our family home. Thinking about Albert Alto and Hans Scharoun, the obvious answer was a fan-shaped floor plan. But this still left the question how to probably bring the landscape into every flat and how to anchor them together. In response, we rotated the fan-shaped forms around an open center. The solution was also helped by the fact that the site and the required low density allowed the structure to be rotated in all directions. The first building follows the direction of the street, the next one turns in, and then the rotation begins. The setting is incredibly simple. 5 identical structural enclosed communal space, large enough for the residents of the 50 apartments to fill it with life. A path leads from the street into the settlement, past all the buildings, and back out to the countryside. The landscape begins in the space between the houses. A grove of trees creates the transition to the natural surrounding. The result is an urban flower, similar to Albert Hans Steiner's concept of the garden town expansion of Zurich in the 1930s. The rows of houses are positioned like our blocks so that nature can be experienced within the housing complex. In terms of social space, all the levels of community have their own outer areas, with the open middle point for a shared range of possibilities. On the ground floor, an arcade provides covered space for the residents. The arcade also houses a communal room, laundry rooms, and hobby rooms. Hidden among the trees are playgrounds for the children, and the path leads to the brook and the neighborhood settlement. The contrast with the individual views of the landscape from each flat out in the countryside. The rotation of the architecture volumes around the undefined middle point and the fanning of the layouts creates a similar rotation with the building themselves, a snapshot, if you like, of a circle dance. Hence, as the name of the project, Syrtos, a Greek circle dance. The pièce de résistance of the design is the fan floor plan, with two large flats embracing a small one. The fan shape allows the small flat to face to two sides. The large flats face 3 or even 4 sides. We designed the project as a timber construction to give the facade deepness. The structural timber columns are situated on the outside. At the angle, the column rises above the level of the roof and supports a stork's nest, hopefully giving a coexistence between animal and humans. Conditions like this in Huttwil am See are rare. With sensitive density, the greenfield project was widely accepted. The result is a pure idea, a built diagram, if you like. The situation becomes more complex when existing buildings are involved. When a new design has to be adapted to an existing structure, the architectural requirements are usually the same, but the solutions are usually not so clear-cut. Last year, while at the Sintzel, we won the project for the Denlerstraße housing development in Zürich, together with Ramser Schmid architects. The construction site is located in the west of Zurich, in Altstetten, a former industrial district. By Zurich standards, Altstetten is highly densified, with residential development and new office buildings. The program includes around 500 apartments, commercial spaces, and restaurants on the ground floor, a daycare center, a nursery school. In other words, an urban body itself. The starting point is identical to many European cities. A sea of faceless buildings from the late 1980s and the early 90s. Here, the existing housing development. Local buildings law mean that existing developments can be densified, making old building stock more attractive for investors. The buildings are freestanding, surrounded by greenery, set back from the street and the edges of the plot. There are no connection to the street. Every floor is inhabited, including the ground floor. The existing buildings were built in 2 stages. The first stage is in 1989 and the second in 1993. Considering climate concerns, it was clear that the existing buildings could not be completely demolished. However, the question was, how much should be kept? This diagram shows the investor wanted to double the number of residents. The basement with the parking areas is to be kept and new buildings constructed above them. But in times of climate crisis, it's not just a question of what is worth to keeping, but what can be kept. Therefore, we tried to keep as much of the existing buildings as possible, but still had to make a careful decision about what to demolish and what to leave stand and integrate into new development. Along the street, it was clear that the buildings were unusable. They are too forbidden to frame a modern urban spatial environment. We wanted to create an urban square for the neighborhood in the center. That is why we decided to tear down all the blocks running north to south, here in yellow. This allows us to transform the open development into boundary blocks. Then we wanted to give the area in the middle a clearer spatial framing, from the structure that shapes urban space to the space that shapes the building structure. The density was still too low, so we built into the courtyards. Like this, we were able to transform the open development into a closed courtyard edge development. However, this also meant changes to existing structure. The living spaces in the existing blocks are strictly south-facing. In the classic boundary blocks development, they would face the street, and entry would be from the outside into the buildings. For this reason, there is now a path through the courtyard where the entrances to the southern ribbons are located. The function in outdoor spaces are mixed. The existing buildings still spring backward and forward, but are now held firmly in place by the new ones. At the same time, the mixture generates a series of recognizable classic urban spaces. Here, 2 courtyards, a neighborhood square, and a street space with commercial uses. That is the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Stephan. That was absolutely beautiful, and beautiful in also the pace with which you tell it, because we can feel, in a sense, the sense of inhabitation as being the thing that really defines the qualities of these buildings. I would like to open this up to questions now. Yep.
Yeah, that was really, really great. I think you're right. What I was thinking of a lot when you were these projects was what was popping into my head, and the final set of slides when you showed the examples of Roman architecture is architects like Vico Magistretti. Do you know those guys in Milan who were rebuilding the city after the Second World War?
Okay, in Milan.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
I know that Adam Caruso wrote a book about Arsenio Verde. There's this kind of modern architecture. That was respecting the. I suppose what I don't want to say urban morphology or typology, because I don't think it's a formal thing that you're interested in. You're interested in spatial relationships, right?
Yes.
And they are urban relationships.
Yes. So I mean that when you have urban development, and you have to have an idea for the outer space, not for the buildings. So this is actually the short message behind. You have to think what are good proportion for the outdoor spaces.
I guess what I'm getting at here is that if modernism was very introverted in its functional idea of a perfect plan, you know, the existence minimum, Hans Meyer kind of ethos, and in the scheme that you showed, the second to last scheme, you've got these modernist objects, but the space between them isn't defined; it's indeterminate, and And if the question of postmodernism was the Nolly plan and how do you think about the space left over after road engineering and cars and bin stores and Corbusier's 5 points, but you're doing a kind of postmodernism, I think, which isn't picturesque or semiotic. It's actually derived from spatial qualities, and it's derived from construction. And that I think is where the art of architecture should be today. I think there are other people in this room trying to do something similar. Like, I mean, it's really, really impressive. It's modest, the way you talk about it, but intellectually I think it's very sophisticated, and on a social political level it's very generous and empathetic.
I can't put it in the history of architecture. That has to do other people has to embed it in the history. But
are there? Yes, I'll start here and move my way back.
Hi, Stephan. Thank you so much for your presentation. I had a quick query about the last project that you presented. If you could elaborate more about the process, the decision process behind the north-south demolition of the building, and perhaps not the east-west or any other combination of demolition. Just want to understand how that decision process went about in your process.
I mean, the problem of the situation now, where we found it, that it was not the buildings are not fixed on the ground; they're swimming around, and you can't just take the whole buildings down. So when you have we wanted to do it in a rectangle system to put it together, so we had also to make some hybrid building which has the half. Actually, here it is. You have a staircase, and on this side you have the new building, and on the other side you have the existing building, and which is coming together. And this is now for planning it. It's really complex to get it together, and this was necessary to get a rectangular system. That otherwise you couldn't fit that together to edge block to perimeter blocks actually.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed it, and perhaps I think it's a project before this which you used the aerial photograph of the kind of circus tent and the buildings around the tents around it, and it made me think of a group of people who put their umbrellas up, and to shelter from the rain, and then they turned to talk to each other. And whilst that's, that was a kind of a distinct party for that project, actually that kind of sense of the buildings being umbrellas. There's an overarching presence of the roof, of the eave, which seems, is very strong, and at the scale of the things you've been working on to date, is a very powerful presence. Wherever you are, it seems to me, within the house, immediately outside the house, and beyond the house. And there is a confidence in that, you're talking about, that phrase about, I completely agree. I like to think, I would say the same thing, that, it's these spaces between the outside space that is what we're looking at and looking for, not the object buildings. And yet, most architects would fall back on a sort of a version of a more formal geometry to reassure themselves they found the right configuration of outside space. And yet you have the confidence and the freedom to, in a sense, it's quite prototypical. It's sort of like it feels like it's primitive forms of settlement that you're exploring in the making of your plans.
Maybe.
But I guess my question is, how do you know when you've got it right? When do you stop?
Oh, it's this is when we have to hand in. It has to, I mean this
it's purely the deadline, right?
Yeah, this is all. Yeah, because you have over doubt about if it's right or you can move a bit. But actually, I mean, in this case, we had also the law of Abstände, which we have to, the building law, which we have to around. We had some certain meters to reach. Yes.
I promised that the microphone is going here.
Thank you so much for the presentation. The projects are very inspiring and lovely. So my question is, I saw there are not prototypes in your layout of your buildings. So I want to know what researches have you done to inform those prototypes? And also, how do you conduct those researches? And have I delivered my question? So
I'm not sure if
I mean, I saw there are certain
our
types.
projects. You
Yeah.
mentioned that our projects are prototypes and
Yeah.
how they come from.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Also, this is difficult. I mean, it's a kind of we developed them from the first setting and on and then the story gets richer and then we figure out, for example, about this gates. This was a kind of moment when we think that the houses are too near to each other, and this was a kind of an idea that when you open a gate that you have distance to your neighbor, and so this is just and this is also in a way something which we know from the Landschaftsgebäude, from the
Country houses.
no, not from the also von den landschaftlichen, also von den von den no, not landscape. From farmers architectures. Yeah, genau.
So buildings that belong in a rural landscape that would be reminiscent of farms or or of small settlement workshops and so on.
Yeah, and how about your plan layout? Because your plan layout was a certain typologic inside, that you have certain types in your layout. Do you do certain research about local events, behavior, and their habit? And how do you conduct the research? Sorry, not in details.
Oh, no, I can't say something to this. We have some references, and they're coming up sometimes in my presentation. But we work out of the structure actually of the ground floor plans and for the spatial idea from the outdoor spaces and then the apartments. And then here it was also a story about this former work yard we have found here with this architecture in wood, which we established to a project.
Hi. I had the privilege of living opposite your Weinlager in Basel for 6 months. And so naturally, when I returned to London, I got quite depressed, actually, with the state of housing here. And so, yeah, it kind of led me to reflect on the condition of housing in Switzerland and how in many aspects you have these quite affordable, beautiful houses, well-constructed houses, in quite an abundance as well, to my understanding. So I suppose my question is, how well do you think you could apply your methodologies and your ethos in a kind of context like London? Not so much the urban-rural condition, but sort of more the economy. What would your response be to our conditions here? Save us.
When I landed with the plane, I saw all these houses which are in lines, and you have also this crescent when they form outdoor spaces, and I think this is very great. And I think what I saw before in the students' work, that you're looking for complexity, and this is, I think, what I think it's not an easy way. I mean, you have to simplify the thing and bring it down to very simple orders. And you have to think about spaces and about construction, about rhythm, and about pattern. This is for me. This is a very important picture which I showed you on the beginning, where this is the work on the ground floor plan, actually, and you fit together structure of a building. So it has a rhythm, and it has a repetition and patterns inside. And this is also the work I like to do also. Yes.
Thank you.
In one of your slides, you have a statement that I think is very interesting to me. It's a very bright position about urban space. And you said, an empty center is a field of possibilities for residents. And I totally agree with that. But I think you have taken it to the next level. When I see the plans, it's literally I've seen some of them that is literally an empty and white canvas for the residents to take the opportunity and shape it and bring a program. You show the markets. And I'm going to ask you this question because I think in the introduction you have the opportunity to travel and live in many places. So obviously there are a lot of public spaces that need to be or be a little bit overly designed to propose how to use, how to move, what to do, how to play. They are a little bit more controlled. What do you think? In these communities, people are not scared of privacy. They can come together. And there are other societies, other cities that actually you can't make something like this happen. And just another thought on that, is that because the typology that you have in the building inside that propose a different way of living that is appealing to certain types of families, or you think it doesn't matter and it could work anywhere?
I mean, in Horgen, perhaps, for instance, in Horgen we have very different people which are living now together. Yeah. And I think what this inspires for activities, actually, the people come together and make something in this outdoor space. And there are other people they didn't want to participate, and it's also okay. So, but when you have all determined which someone has to do, so nothing, there will be no interaction between the neighbors.
Yeah, and probably the context of my question is because today was a proposal that I was quite daring that trying to remove some of the private gardens, bring all them together and make it as a common place and for residents to develop that program. And I think someone said, I have lived in one of the places and actually I moved away because it didn't work. People didn't maintain or didn't work. I may be misunderstood. So I was wondering what it brings together that you said the public space, it's more important the outdoor for the residential development, but I still think it is the typologies and the way of life that you propose that allow people to take ownership, the outdoor, and bring this community. So, I don't know.
Thank you very much. It's lovely talk. I think threshold is a wonderful word, and it already starts the emotional fixture of the scheme as a whole, the sense of activity and something special. Could I ask you how the residents come about in your schemes? I mean, do people know of your development before you start, and do you know them, like in a housing association or whatever? Or is it speculative and then commercial?
No, this Maingasse, this is the city of Basel who built these houses, and it was just for rent. I mean, there's no community behind who developed this project. It's just it's social housing from the city, actually.
So are people allocated to it, or do people choose to come?
Normally they need to have children to get in. When you want an apartment with 4 pieces, you need to be 3 person, actually. This is the rule. So.
And in one of the schemes, I think I heard you say the column was higher than the roof.
Yeah, this is it in the end. This is about the Storchensiedlung.
That's the bird, the stork.
Yeah.
So
here.
has the birth it's gone up?
Yeah, here. This is the program here. On this construction site, there are a nest of storks. Well, 6 storks we have to habitat here, and this was the idea that they
Irene, did you have a question?
I would be, thank you very much. It's a beautiful work, but I would like to hear a little bit more about the clients you work for.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned already some municipality in Basel, and one is, I mean, the work is of very high quality from a design point of view, and are you one of those rare people who are able to do this kind of work? In other words, does it rely on an enlightened client, or is this a normal situation as far as Switzerland is concerned? And also, do you work for developers? I think you do, is that right?
What was
do you work for private developers, commercial developers?
Or as this here in Etwil am See, there is a clinic, a psychiatric clinic, which has land around the clinic, and they developed this apartment housing, but they want just normal people who live there. This is not the sunniest place, and then they have not so high return on this investment, actually. Yes. And in Basel, this was just the city, and in Horgen, this is a kind of society who wants that they have also here in Horgen they have no cars, so they live together on this hill, and they just can have not everybody can have a car. They have just a few parking possibilities, and this is how the people for this project are also chosen, because when people use a car, they don't get there. But this is just here. This is really special, actually. Is this your question? I mean, this is. I mean, Maingasse and Storchensiedlung and Denverstrasse. These are by competition we came to this project. So we participated at this on this competition, and then we won, and yeah.
There's a couple of themes that I feel very curious about. You mentioned one of the themes was that you were learning from the pattern or the style of building in the landscape, from things like farmsteads and buildings that we would expect to be familiar to us in a rural landscape. And so then it seems that you take something of their sense of spacing, but also something of, sometimes oversized elements. And you bring these into conjunction with spaces that we often think of as perhaps only small in terms of their necessary. So the wonderful photo that you showed us of the huge doors opening to reveal an entrance that then looks through to a window. Yes, and where we see the lake beyond. Mm-hmm. And this sort of juxtaposition of scales, is this something that you reflected on from landscape buildings, or does it come from something else?
Now this is this pulp sheet as a Schotten. We wanted that when you walk on these paths through these houses on this Schlaufe we made, that you can see out through the houses in the landscape. That's why they're so these bulkheads crying out in the landscape. But I don't know if
where it might have come from. Part of the reason that I asked is because I was struck when we were looking at this photo. There's a similar photo of the work of Dennis Lasden and his National Theatre building. So the question was raised: have we ever figured out how to do that in London? And in a way, Lasden had perhaps a similar ethos, that sometimes a threshold should have a sense of grandness, and perhaps that sense of being grand or powerful as we make a transition can nevertheless not be the property of a civic building, but might even be a sense of home. And I was quite struck by the fact that many of us who, like I was born on a farm. So, my sense of entering a barn is that, of course, the doors are very large. And nevertheless, there's a kind of everyday quality to entering through the barn, even though the opening is, magnificent in a way. But the daily practices are things that we would just expect to have a kind of ease about it. So I was quite taken with what struck me as an unusual juxtaposition here, but the effects are incredibly powerful. I have another question. Do you listen to music when you design?
No.
Because another thing that I feel is that many of many of the ways in which I feel you're asking us to experience the space, and sometimes even how you show it in the plan, it's like a dance. And there's something of the way in which there's an idea of fluidity and movement, but rhythm and punctuation that is shaping how you envisage daily life working. And I wondered if there were soundtracks to this.
No, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, are there any other questions? All right, Stephan, thank you. This has been a delight, and it's such a treat to see you.